Hi everyone, welcome back to the Actor Number About podcast.
Do you want to start that again with first
My
unlucky?
brain. I hate my brain. Do you know what? This is how it's going to start because this is a mental health podcast and we're going to talk about mental health.
Welcome to the Actor Number podcast. I'm Minty, and here we'll talk about business, freelance, mindset, education, mental health, life, personal growth, and everything to help you overcome your fears, know yourself, and create the life and career of your dreams. Episodes in English and Spanish every week.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're having Adam again up for the challenge. This is so interesting because he was in my first episode and the same thing happened. And he kept telling me like, go on, go on, go on. And it was actually really interesting. So I'll leave up to it. But I'm so glad to have you again because now you're not only just a mental health advocate and a podcast host, but you're also an author. So first, thank you for coming. And can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, so I mean, this is third time lucky. It's third time I've won actually.
Yeah.
And you're right. The exact same thing happened at the beginning, which is quite funny because I think podcasts should be a chat. That's why I'm all for keeping in the ugly bits. As Metchi just said there, I am a podcast host, my own, the It's Good to Talk podcast, which actually Metchi's going to be on in a minute as well. Like after this one, so you can watch both of them. There'll be links.
Go watch it.
As well. Hey, I'm going to market this. Why not? Anyway, yes, and I also do. I'm a mental health advocate, and the podcast is for mental health, and I've been doing that for quite a while now, as well as being a chair of a mental health charity here in the UK, which is kind of where a lot of stuff for the book came from. And actually, this book's a bit of a weird one. So the whole point of the book and kind of where it came from was kind of around mental health as well. So I've written books before. I've just never actually publish them because I've kept them like babies. Like, so the next book I'm going to be bringing out actually is the first book I ever wrote. This isn't the first book I ever wrote. This is the first kind of proper book I've brought to publication. The reason I wrote this is one night I was down. That's literally the reason I started writing it. I was down one night and just went, okay, I'm just going to start writing. It was kind of a way of dealing with it. It was almost like a mindful action, technically, to start writing. And so I started writing and then realised that I had written the title, 12 chapters, titles, the foreword, and 1,000 words of the first chapter, and then went, oh shit, I'm actually writing a book. So that's kind of how it started. I mean, the book is called Awaken Awareness, Mindfulness in the Age of Distraction. Yeah, it was a mindful action that actually then led me to create a book on mindfulness. And it all started from me being down one night. That's literally where it came from. I was down one night, needed something to do because I was just like, I just wasn't in a good place. No, I wasn't like really, really bad, but it wasn't a good night. And started writing. And like I say, I was 1,000 words into the first chapter and the foreword already written, and then going, oh, Christ, I can't like leave it there now. Guess I'm writing a book. And it came from there. This was never meant to be a book. Like the books I've written before that are kind of pre-publication and the other stuff that I'm still writing, they were all the books that were kind of meant to come to fruition. They're the ones that were meant to come forward. But weirdly enough, the first one that's actually come forward is one that came out of nowhere. So yeah, it's a book on mindfulness and kind of how we deal with it in the modern world, from everything from tips and tricks to just talking to the reader about the fact that, hey, have you noticed that this is the case for you? And that we've continued to do this, looking at the scientific as well as the origins of the spiritual as well. So I've tried to keep both sides of it. So you'll see quite a lot in the first half of the book, or at least the first third. I talk more about the interaction of mindfulness and the modern sphere, the modern world that we're in. And I do that by talking more about the interaction of how the spiritual and the origins of mindfulness came to us. And then as the book moves on, I look more into the scientific backing that goes along with it. So I try and make it open to everyone and everyone's kind of part of it so they can see it and go, oh, I don't believe in this bit. Okay, cool. Well, there's the actual research as well. Or oh, I don't like the research stuff. Okay, that we also have the spiritual side. We have the origins of it as well. So you can take something from it, whichever part that is.
I love that because it can help everyone. And it's interesting what you said. It's like you journaled your way into a book. And I can actually feel you. The other day, I just told you off camera, but I couldn't sleep, and I started writing what would then become a book, which I'm still working towards. And it is something that I do want to talk about, but we're going to leave this for the very end of the podcast. So for everyone who wants to publish their own book, I do want to get like your insights there. But before we go into the details with the book now, I just want to say this is wow. I didn't know the story behind the book. It was like, you could call it messy action, inspired action, whatever you want to fucking call it, but it's just Wow. It's interesting that it's like you started journaling and you were like, I'm onto something here.
Yeah, I mean, it was. So I'm the kind of weird kid that used to, I say kid, not anymore, but anyway, I used to just write essays for the sake of it because I like learning. I have the torment of Tantalus, wanting to know everything, but knowing that I never will be able to. But I still want to write essays or whatever, or just whatever. And so I thought, yeah, let's just start writing it as if I'm going to write it. And then I got so far into it that I realised it was no longer a theoretical. It kind of had to become a reality because the foreword. If I'd have just written the foreword, then maybe I wouldn't have gone forward because that's just the forward. This is the kind of thing I should be thinking about if I'm looking at mindfulness. But when I started writing the actual first chapter, I'm like, oh no, this is actually a thing now. Like I've started to discuss this more fully, and yeah, it just kept flowing. But yeah, it all came from just having a bad night, really. And I came downstairs to my office and just had a film on, and then because I have 3 screens, so I tend to do three or four things at once. So I had some film on, don't know what it was, and then just opened another page on Word and just went, okay, let's just start. And then there we go. It kind of came from that, and it was literally a kind of mindful action because it was me actively kind of going over how I feel about things in mental health and mindfulness, whilst being mindful about the thing that then showed me mindfulness. So kind of came from that.
That's really interesting. Now I want to ask you something because mindfulness is a word I feel like at this point for some people it's like a buzzword. It's overused, and I feel like not everybody knows exactly what it is. So if you can explain to the people listening, like what is mindfulness actually? Because it's a word that is thrown here, out, and there, but I don't know. Do people who actually talk about mindfulness know what mindfulness is? Because you have mindfulness meditation, mindfulness, but what is it for you?
Almost fucking never do they ever understand what it is. The amount of people I've heard use mindfulness and they have no idea what it is. It's a buzzword for it. And I kind of rail against quite a lot. I even make occasional quips in my book about it as well. But I do rail against what I call the LA wellness, which is what everyone seems to recognize mindfulness as being. And mindfulness meditation is just like, sitting in the corner going, whilst thinking about things like that. That's not what fucking mindfulness is. Mindfulness is being able to recognize, sit in, understand, and be within the current moment. So most people do mindful actions all the time without even realizing it. But it's not mindfulness until you realize you're doing it. And by that, I mean, so we have a mutual friend who goes out and he looks at the moon and he takes time for himself. He breathes, he takes time, looks at the moon and just kind of chills out, basically. He never understood that was a mindful action. Once he understood that was a mindful action, you can take part of it. And he did. He understood what was going on, that he was taking in the day. He was like defragging a computer. He was going through that and understanding that was what's happened. Now, once you understand that and see that as what is happening, then you can look over it. Then you can see what you've just been through, what is happening right now, what the day has been for you, what this moment has been for you, how you're actually feeling. Because most of the time, we might get upset and go and do something, do a mindful action, have no idea really how we feel about it. It's just that we know we need to do something because our body's telling us, go and, but it's not until we actually look at it that we understand what's actually happening. And that's the mindfulness. The biggest difference as well between that and any kind of other moment that you're looking at is the idea of non-judgmental awareness as well. So you can't look at it and be going, everything I just did was wrong. That was shit. I'm a piece of shit. Whatever. That's not it. It's completely non-judgmental. You're seeing it as an outside observer on what your moment is.
So pretty much like being present in the moment and
being present in the moment is literally, I think, definition of mindfulness. Yeah.
And then, but do you feel like also removing or at least trying to remove the mental noise, which is something that for people with ADHD listening to, we know what that looks like. It's like it's just it never shuts up.
I would say no. You're not removing the mental noise. You're recognizing it and you're seeing it. You're just not judging yourself for having it.
Okay. So you're listening to the thoughts that are coming and you just you pay attention to them and you just let them go and continue with.
Yes.
Okay. So that's what it is. And it's not just meditation. I'm just trying to help people understand what it is and
so it's
how they can practice it.
Yeah, with mindfulness, I mean, I do, obviously, in the book, I do give some techniques and different things. It's recognizing what is happening. So it's being present in the moment. That is, the dictionary definition of mindfulness, but there's non-judgmental awareness of it. And you don't try and brush it away, because brushing it away, you're not being mindful because you don't see what's actually happening. You don't understand what's happening. And that's where most people who talk about mindfulness fuck it up, because they basically tell you to clear your mind. They tell you to brush away. No, you don't brush away. Mindfulness at its core, and by every definition, actual definition, when it first came over here and into the West, and the research behind it, from its original roots, all say you take in and you see the moments pass and you understand them. You look at them, you hold them, you understand them. Never does it say, until more modern 10, 15 years, that you're meant to brush past any of it. You're always meant to see it, hold it, and understand it. And that's with a non-judgmental gaze. So you can see if, it's not you're not judging whether you've been a shitty person, but you could still understand that you may have been. Actions that you took may be the reason that something's happened. And that's the whole point of it. You don't want to get rid of the fog, because the fog may be the understanding that you've not yet looked at, because beforehand you were just going, I don't need the fog. Well, actually, you might need the fog, because the fog's kind of the reason for that initial thought.
Have you ever heard of the term shadow work?
I've heard of it. It's used mainly for ADHD. And
it's pretty much looking at the shit that you don't want to address in your life, like your saddest moments, or something that you don't like about yourself, something bad that you did, or just looking at the shit in your life and addressing it and understanding it and accepting it and forgiving people that have wronged you. It's just like accepting it for what it is, but not forgiving in the sense of like, I forgive you. Like, okay, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say, I don't know, you were raised by a parent who did their best, but they didn't know any better. And because of that, you have a few traumas. Now you're not old and you're like, okay, I see all of this shit. I see how this traumatized me. I don't hate you because of this. I do understand that you did your best with the knowledge that you had at the time, but I'm choosing to, let go of that, and I'm just going to continue with my life, and like, I don't owe you anything because of it. Do you feel that mindfulness is part of it as well? Like,
no, I mean, firstly, ignorance isn't an excuse to cause pain, because it's usually that's kind of the gaslighting way that most people get away with hurting people, is by simply saying, I didn't know any better. Yeah, you did, or you could have at least understood that you knew better. In fact, mindfulness would have told them that they were doing something wrong. So mindfulness would have been the thing beforehand, telling that parent or telling whoever it was, this is what's happening right now. So mindfulness would be real helpful as a precursor to whatever is going on. I also don't like the idea of past forgiveness, because any movement forward for any individual person means that they are no longer the person that needs forgiving, and thus you're forgiving something and holding on to it because you've had to forgive it. But that's a separate issue. No, so for looking back on things, when you start to do that, you become reactionary, and reactionary movements aren't part of mindfulness. They're actively not mindfulness. So mindfulness is living in and understanding that moment, not reacting to it, not specifically just reactionarily reacting to it, and a lot of kind of what you'd say with the shadow work, and I think that happens a lot with ADHD as well, is when you go back and you would be more reactionary and take action on stuff that's already gone. That's not part of what it is. Your mindfulness is what is happening right now. And it's to create a better future, because it's what's happening in the moment, and you can reflect on what each moment is giving you, and you can check in with yourself several times through that day. But to go back, that would be more when you're looking at meditation. People always overlap, and meditation can be used for mindfulness, but meditation and mindfulness they're not the same thing. They're not to be looked at in the same vein. With meditation, you can go back and look at things that have happened. You could try and understand. You can take in those different moments, or you can't clear your mind because that's physically fucking impossible, but you can have a moment of your life and whatever's going on there. Mindfulness is the moment. It is to see, hold, understand the moment as it is in that moment, without judgment and without reactionary things. Just to give any kind of context here for anyone that's wondering, I also have a teaching diploma in mindfulness and one in meditation as well. And most of what I have seen from LA Wellness irritates me to the core, because it's not anything to do with what mindfulness is.
What do you mean by LA Wellness?
Pretty much every time that we see mindfulness and meditation, anything like that, on TV or in the public eye nowadays, it is this very, I had a gap year and now I'm doing this and namaste, and you have no idea what that word means. You have no connection to what spiritualism is. It's just the perpetuation of a course that they want to sell. And that's what it's become for so many people. And that's why when people hear the word mindfulness, meditation, anything like that, in their heads, they'll say one of two things. They'll go, I've tried it and it does, and I can't do it. Yes, you fucking can. You do it most of the time anyway. You just haven't engaged with it. Or they'll go, I don't do any of that nonsense. Again,
Yeah, woo-woo stuff.
we
They
do it.
think it's like that, and it's actually not it.
Yeah.
They,
And again, everyone does it. It's just that you don't understand you're doing it.
so I feel like the
You know,
term has been bastardized
LA
by
wellness.
them. Yeah,
That's
you're
what it is.
absolutely right.
It irritates the hell out of me because, I mean, I've talked about before, when I meditate, for instance, I meditate to die hard. I don't do this sit in the corner going, My mindful actions are everything from writing to running to hitting things. You can be mindful whilst you're doing martial arts and hitting people. There's no, it doesn't mean you can't do that. You can interact and understand that. The sensations of your body, the movement of who you are, all moves along with mindfulness. That's the point.
Yeah. My best friend, he loves drawing and painting, and sometimes I see him when he starts. It's just, he's so mindful. He could be hours and hours. He doesn't even read. He doesn't drink. He doesn't go to the bathroom. He's just like sitting there and just painting. And that to me is really what mindfulness is, and that's when he gets his best ideas, and then he realizes that.
But no, what you just described as meditation.
So he goes into a meditative state. Is that what I think?
So meditation is a disconnection. Mindfulness is a reconnection. What he's doing is he's basically going on autopilot, and that's why he has no interaction of time. That's because that is a meditative thing. So most people that do gardening or cooking, they've meditated, they just have no idea what they're doing. And then there's different forms of meditation, but that is a form of meditation. Mindfulness is, you can have mindful actions, and you could argue that that is a mindful action, but when you engage in it is when it becomes mindfulness, because you need that engagement, that non-judgmental awareness. That's what makes it mindful. And as I say, a mutual friend that we have that looks at the moon, he kind of went, I never understood that I was doing a mindful action until, you did this. And now it really helps, because now I kind of recognize, I know why I'm doing it, and I can see it. And that's the whole point of mindfulness. Mindfulness is that reconnection and that holding of the individual moment. So yeah, and that's the thing as well, is that people never seem to separate the two, and there is a definitive separation. There's a lot more in the book, but I mean, the first thing I'd say is you have to separate it. You have to take control of it. If you don't have the control of it, if you have no control of it, and your excuse every time is, but I can't take control of it because there's a mess, because there's this, because it's taking 1 minute, taking 2 minutes, hell, taking a tea break, if you're in the UK, that is time when you can just say, this moment is mine. How many people out there have a smoke break? Same kind of time. How many people go up and go to get their coffee? That 1, 2, 3 minutes, that moment of separation and from your work, not separation from you, separation from your work, is a moment in which you can actually engage with mindfulness. I talked earlier about mindful eating. I won't try and explain it here, because I do a better job on paper. But there are things like mindful eating, mindful walking. These are things that you can literally add into your day. Walking, getting off the bus a couple of stops early so that you can walk to work. When you're having your lunch, don't sit at your fucking desk. Do not sit at your desk. I don't give a shit what your boss says. They don't have that right. Stand up, go to the lunchroom, or go outside for 5 minutes, okay? Eat. You can have those mindful actions. That is, mindful eating can be part of that. And that's just when you understand your food. Because how many of us in the past have just gone, I need to grab some lunch, and just wolfed the entire thing down? Probably can't even remember. How many people can remember what they've eaten for lunch? The reason they can't remember what they eaten for lunch is because there was no interaction with it. They didn't reconnect to what they were doing. What mindfulness is doing is to reconnect you. So that's where mindful eating, for instance, will come in. You take note of the sensations, the taste, every part of it. And that is part of your reconnection to yourself. So that even those 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes can allow you a time out of your day that you already have there. You're just not using it the right way to then go back into your work.
Yeah, and not use that time, and this goes for me, not use that time to multitask like I just did. I had a very busy day today. The night before we jumped into school, I was finishing work and I was eating peanuts and a hard-boiled egg, which is yikes, but at least it's healthy. But I was just eating like this, and I was just like trying to finish the emails, and when I realized that I finished my food, I was still hungry. I'm like, oh no, but I have to record the podcast. And I'm like, I didn't even stop for a second to look at the food that I was eating and to enjoy it. It was just like, just not even chewing at some point, just like, did that, okay, finished, run, let's go.
With mindful eating especially, it's more again, reconnection to yourself. If you're going beyond that, you're disconnecting again. It's a reconnection.
Oh, really?
Meditation is a disconnection. Mindfulness is a reconnection. You're reconnecting to every sensation. So eating a boiled egg, for instance, your interaction with its smell, the taste, the texture, the way it feels when it goes down your throat, every part of that And that alone, mindfulness is merely the reconnection to you, because it's your sensations, your way of interacting with that one thing. When you go beyond that, you're disconnecting from what is simply you and that moment. For instance, thinking about where the eggs come from isn't that moment. That's a past moment. You're not doing that.
Right. Now it clicked. Now I really,
I
now I
hope
get
so. I've read a book on
it.
it.
I need to read the book. But yeah, and now with the digital detox, so I want to ask you something. Does your book explain how to avoid doom scrolling? Because I struggle with it. I'm not happy about it, but I do.
I think it doesn't. I don't expressly state doom scrolling, but again, it's in with those moments that you take to yourself, and it's understanding that you detox yourself by doing kind of the stuff that you always have done. You just recognize it, like the walk. Walk is a great one. Again, mutual friend of ours, their way of dealing with mindfulness is they're a mindful walker. That's how they interact. They have actually, because I have a course on mindfulness, mindfulness practitioners course that I created that was recognized last year, and they passed that, and that's one of the things that they do for it. And that's the reason I know a lot about these, because part of my course is to get people to create their own mindfulness actions. But there are a lot of people that will do that walk, or it may even be that your moment of mindfulness is simply sitting, talking to yourself and having that interaction. For some people will be a mindful action, as long as it's done non-judgmentally. So that's the bit that often catches people out, because the amount of people that will go and look in the mirror and then go, "You piece of shit." It's like, yeah, no, you're immediately in problems here. But everyone, or a lot of people, especially neurodivergent, have done that at some. And that's where we have the kind of, okay, what did I just do? Okay, I need to understand what I just did. That was that. Okay, right. And working it through in your head, that's a mindful action. That's mindfulness. You're seeing it. You're holding on to it. You're understanding it. You're not passing judgment on what you just did there. So those kind of things, it's not necessarily that you're trying to expressly avoid doom scrolling. It's that everything that is part of our modern life and how we interact with the digital sphere that we're in is part of that, which will disconnect you from the digital and reconnect you with yourself.
And yeah, so the mirror, it's interesting, because sometimes it can go pretty well, and sometimes it can go pretty bad. And yeah, for you, like you said,
no judgment. That goes both ways. That goes both ways. It also means you don't stand in front.
Even the positive one does. It shouldn't.
That's judgment. There is no judgment.
But can you give me, what would be an example for yourself? Like, you're looking at yourself in the mirror. There's no judgment. What else is there?
The moment that you're in. What have I just done? Oh, I just did this. Oh, okay. Oh, I've just done my hair. Oh, my hair's a little bit different today.
Okay.
Oh, why did I do it like that? Yeah, okay. So I'm up a little bit late. Oh, I'm up for this. Okay. Oh, so that means I need to move this to them, because obviously this has happened now. That I woke up a little bit later. I woke up a little bit earlier. Okay, I can go for a walk now. Okay. You're interacting with the moment. But getting up and going, "You're a piece of shit," and equally getting up and going, "You're amazing. Oh my God, you're amazing," will also disconnect you. Not everyone's amazing, especially not all the fucking time. So you need to be in reality, not simply in what you've created as reality. That's why, again, mindfulness is the reconnection of what is happening. I actually talk, and I really wish I could remember the chapter. Actually, I have the book in front of me, ladies and gentlemen. I can tell you, because I can find the chapter. I'm pretty sure I named it that. I talk about mind traps specifically, and they generally are negative, but not always. So mind traps, chapter 11. There you go, near the end of the book. So it's how, and I talk about how to overcome mind traps, which is a lot in neuroscience as well. And
what is a mind trap?
A mind trap is those kind of thoughts, those negative thought patterns that are dragging you away somewhere. But negative thought patterns can come in the guise of positivity. I mean, negative positivity, which is a massive thing, but they can come in that guise, because if there's still a trap pulling you in one direction or the other, then that's a trap. That is a mind trap that has been created. So then we use mindfulness to overcome that and to recognize that and to not be taken in. And if we're doing stuff without judgment, without immediate reaction, and understanding it in the moment, those mind traps can never get us.
I feel like everybody should practice mindfulness, but who especially should? Like, if you had to say, stress and anxiety.
Stress, anxiety, and depression have had the most research in those three groups. So stress, anxiety, and depression have had the most. Now, that is, of course, very simplistic. There are various forms of stress, various forms of anxiety, various forms of depression. So there's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But those are the three groups that, at least in their general terms, have had a lot of research done on them. They've been seen to be very helpful. There's actually, with a lot of mindfulness and a lot of specific mindfulness practices, there's actually a thickening of certain parts of brain matter that helps you with your day-to-day life. There's been literal physical adaptation by your brain to help you offset against the things that your brain is already doing and what the rest of life is doing. So this isn't just they felt better after doing this. This is they can literally see the thickening of certain parts of your brain, the reconnection of certain parts of your brain. That research has been done into it, and it's been done more than once. This is repeatable empirical evidence, not just what somebody's thought of on a weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. And I can imagine from the anxiety perspective and the stress how it would work and how it would affect you positively. But for depression, what would it look like? Because I feel like for anxiety would be like, okay, I have all these thoughts, right? Like, okay, I understand that and I can continue with my day. Like I'll see it, I get it, and I can continue with my day. But with depression, is it the same? It's like, okay, I acknowledge this thought and then I just go on.
I think a lot of it with depression, at least from my interaction with how it worked, would be around the mind trap, because they're what's tending to drag people back down. You have a good day with depression, but then there's just one thought that's niggling in the back of your head. If you don't interact with that thought, if you don't see that thought for what it is, good or bad, then it drags you down. There's an analogy I used to use.
So if you don't judge it, like you can interact because it's going to come to you.
You interact with it. You don't react to it. You don't judge it. And so an analogy I used to use for this kind of thing, and it comes from, if you get think about a thought in your brain that you have no real idea of at the moment, but there's something niggling in there. You don't know what's going on, but there's just something. Okay, most people don't interact with it. It could be that somebody shouted at you one week, and then you don't even think about it. But if you think about that as being a loaf of bread in the plastic on the side, the kitchen side at home, you put the loaf of bread there, it's still in date, everything's good, and then you go away for a couple of days and you come back, it's okay, the bread's still there, okay. Then you go away for a week, and now there's little beads of moisture inside the plastic bag, and it's ever so slightly just bulging just a little bit, but not much. It still looks the same. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Then you go away for a month and you come back. Well, now there's a little bit of mold and it's changed a little bit. And I'll just keep it there. I can't be bothered to put it away. It's just there. I can't be bothered to throw it away. I'll go back to the back of the loaf. I'll interact with it a different way. And then you go away for a year and you come back and it's just a black mess. The bag's gone. The bread's gone. There's just a growth that's there now that's feeding on everything that was there and creating a completely different landscape to what your kitchen was. And that's the same way as we interact with those individual thoughts. When we use mindfulness to interact with those and see them, all we're doing is opening the bag. We open the bag, we check the best before date. We're interacting with it in the moment, understanding what it is before we allow anything to go further with it. And that's, I think, how, especially with depression, it would be helpful to avoid that future task.
I love the analogy, and it makes total sense. Like, just instead of like putting it for later and just like, not addressing it, not looking at it, not thinking about it, just because for some people, I feel like it hurts, right? So they don't want to touch it because it's like, oh, it hurts. No, but it's going to hurt way more when it's completely molded. So I see that you talk about emotional intelligence, and this is a topic that I love because this is something I feel like most people in society nowadays don't have. Or maybe not just nowadays. Maybe this was always like this. But yeah, what's your take on emotional intelligence and anything you would like to share?
So one of the biggest interactions that's seen, and the research that shows with emotional intelligence, is those that are most interactive with their own emotional regulations and understanding, therefore, of other people's, is they tend to be better leaders, better managers, better at interacting with other people. All of these things are helped by mindfulness, because your emotional regulation comes a lot from that reactive course that most people take. So if you're not immediately reacting to something, when somebody shouts at you in your workplace, when somebody spills a coffee on your keyboard, whatever it is, if your immediate thought isn't to grab them, punch them, or shout at them, there's an emotional regulation. And with mindfulness, that's where you can help that, because your immediate thought isn't to be reactive. It's to understand and to see the situation, to deal with it afterwards. Now, yes, you can still be angry, you can still be whatever, but you're not being immediately reactive. And so that emotional regulation then goes to help things like emotional intelligence. And the emotional intelligence then can help you within your job, within your relationships at home, and everything in between, because you have a better regulation of yourself, which also means you recognize other people's. And therefore, when it comes to decision making, conflict resolution, and everything in between, you have that slight upper hand. And that's why mindfulness and emotional intelligence do overlap quite a lot, because they often see as well in the research that those who are interacting with some form of mindfulness practice tend to show better emotional regulation and have a higher interaction with emotional intelligence compared to their counterparts that don't interact the same way.
I do have a question, and I feel like you might be very opinionated on this, because I know what you think about the other cue. But do you think that some people are born with more emotional intelligence than others?
No, there's many a different way of interacting with the emotional regulation. That's all it is. So what becomes emotional intelligence comes from everything leading up to it. But the initial way in which somebody reacts, that can be different in different people. People are born with different ways of interacting, but that isn't innately emotional intelligence by itself. So the way that somebody, when, for instance, if somebody punches someone, one person's going to punch back, another person would walk away, another person would shout. Your interaction with it, the way that your mind works for that, may be different from an innate purpose, but that is merely a part of, or a starting point for emotional intelligence. It isn't the evaluated outcome. So no, I don't think people are born with greater emotional intelligences. I think they can just be born with different ways that then have to be molded into what becomes emotional intelligence, preferably through mindfulness and those kind of parts around it.
And I find it interesting because it's, for me, not just about like how you react and like if you're reactive or not. Also, when you're actually thinking logically, trying to help someone out. I've encountered many people who have, like, maybe they're struggling with a very painful disease,
Mhm.
and sometimes they're like, all I want is just to be heard. I just want to vent. I don't need you to say like, "Oh, it's gonna be fine." Like, don't be my advocate. It's actually making things worse. And then you
Mhm.
learn by listening to them and their needs. But like, I feel like you learn that with time and by just being around people who need that type of help.
That's also mindfulness, because literally what you're talking about is immediate reactive response.
I do want to ask you, because I think this could have a lot to do with one of the chapters. I don't know which chapter it is, but there's one called Cultivating Compassion, Mindfulness Pathways to Understanding. Does that teach you how to help others, how to listen to others, how to interact with others?
With that, it's more about your place within and interaction with others. So it can be, if you're reading it in that way, if your mindset is to look at, I want to look at this book and see how everyone's amazing kind of approach, which, I don't agree, but it's a person's approach, then yes, I would say emotional intelligence chapter and cultivating compassion would go together. The main difference is cultivating compassion is where I bring the science in. So emotional intelligence isn't as much cultivating, although I do. There is the science, there is the research in the emotional intelligence as well. But cultivating compassion specifically, I kind of overly use the empirical evidence to show it and how it interacts. But yeah, if you're cultivating compassion, is to understand, and to understand is to be able to take those moments, and taking those moments is part of mindfulness.
So you can cultivate it, because I feel like, for me, for example, I use me as an example. I used to be a very compassionate person. I had a lot of empathy, and for the longest time I was convinced that I lacked empathy at all, because I didn't feel anything for anyone. And I remember going to the psychiatrist and be like, "Excuse me, I think I might be a psychopath." And he's like, "No, you're not." But I don't feel, no, you're not. And then I remember I kept reading, and then one day I reconnected with my feelings, and I realized why I shut it down. It was a lot. It was a lot to handle, and I couldn't deal with how much of it I felt. So that's why I kind of, like, I don't know, my brain shut it down for a reason, maybe to help me. Do you think that that can be retrained and regulated, so it's like you're not a robot without feelings, but you're also not overwhelmed and feeling so much empathy for everyone that you cannot live your own life because you're always trying to help other people?
To immediately help other people and to be overwhelmed by them is something you avoid by literally taking the mindful moment, because they allow you to recognize what's happening. Previously, where you're looking at something and just reacting to it and doing it, helping everybody else, and you'll have people that tell you can't do all this, you'll never really interact with the fact that you're doing it until you're mindful about it and actually see it for what it is without the judgment and reaction of yourself. In terms of cultivating the cultivation of compassion, it's the cultivation of understanding of where you are and where other people are, and what is happening around you and around them. Some would call it compassion, some may not, but that's how you would interact with it. It's this understanding of the kind of the baseline of the human experience.
One of the chapters is about society, envisioning a calmer, kinder world. Do you think that's possible?
If mindfulness is enacted in different ways in different parts, so the final, actually not the final chapter, but for like 3 chapters, I give almost identical headings. I think I changed like 1 or 2 words, but there are different chapters, different ways of interacting with it. But there are certain parts that I go over. It's education, global interaction and community, because that's how we deal with things. Education and the way that we interact mindfulness into education is going to help that way that the world continues. The way that a community deals with mindfulness is going to help those in the community, and then global leaders and their interaction with understanding their place within all of it.
I
And for
think
everybody
they
else,
should be
will
the
also,
first ones to, practice mindfulness. That should be like a
mindfulness is very much a bottom up, not top down. Mindfulness is not just for the individual, but it starts with the individual.
yeah, and it affects society, of course. Like, and now I want to ask you something. Is there any country in the research that you've done for the book? Is there any country that practices the art of mindfulness more than other countries? And does that
Japan.
society? Okay. And how do you feel that helps the society? Because I feel like there's two faces to Japan.
They are
There's the one that they're so sad, they're so like, and then the other side.
Yes,
and I know that I have Japanese friends who don't want to come back. They prefer to stay here because it's that bad. Because the society is very judgmental.
Yeah, it is in those parts, and those aren't the parts that are mindful. So if you look at the parts that are mindful, they are community led, and they're where all the old people are. If you look at the islands and where they live the longest, the main part of all research that has been put into that is that they have a community led, interactive understanding of each other. Literally mindfulness on a community level. They practice mindfulness. They practice meditation. They practice forms of Tai Chi. They practice these things throughout their day, and that's part of it. They look after each other. They understand each other's position in life. They are being a mindful community. Now, the friends that you have, and I'm sure some of the friends I have, background in martial arts, a lot
big
of
cities,
the big cities, and there's no fucking mindfulness there. That's not part of it. The only part of big cities where you'll find mindfulness tends to be in the martial arts communities, and the martial arts communities then, where are most of their training centres? They're outside of the big cities. I mean,
right.
you've got that with most of it. I mean, look at the origin of karate, for instance. It's Okinawa, which is not massively overdeveloped even now, and that was where you have a lot of meditation, a lot of mindful actions that come with it. You also have quite a lot of mindfulness as well in a lot of Northern European countries, which also have kind of conversely the happiest people in the world, unsurprisingly, and that's kind of part of it. When you have that understanding, Denmark and Finland especially tend to have more mindful communities where there's we just talked about a cultivated compassion for each other, especially in places like Finland. So, and they are the happiest communities in the world. So, literally, we have evidence, and the research that's been done into it that shows mindful action and community-led interactions being longer-lived people. And the main thing that all the research has said is that community interaction is one of the biggest things that helps with life expectancy. It comes from mindfulness. And that's where, the life expectancy in the big cities of Japan isn't as high as those in those rural communities.
Yeah, now it makes sense, because when you mentioned Japan, I was like, yeah, I feel like there's one Japan and there's the other. But yeah, it makes total sense. Now, I do want to ask you, this reminds me of something I saw once in a documental. There was this Japanese lady, and they were talking about her work, and it was this community. They all had like their jobs, and she's been working the same job for like 50 years, something like that. It's the most boring job ever, and she was happy. She was like, I enjoyed this. Like, and she did it with love, and it was like, was she being mindful about her job?
It's boring for you, but not for her, because everyone's an individual. So she would have been mindful of understanding and that she wants to do it, and that's the point. But mindfulness, especially when you have that community kind of interactions, and especially with jobs, when those jobs are just simply part of how you go about your life, and they are part of what's helping the community, then they tend to be something that people enjoy doing. If it's, you're going into a big city and I work in Walmart as a greeter, I don't even know if they do that anymore, then yeah, it's likely not going to be part of that. But when it's community and, you're in a shop that helps 5 people each day, or, you're the person that does the lawns for everyone in the community, that's a far more kind of mindful, interactive, community-led ideal.
Yeah. And now that you're talking about communities and like the happiness level or the fulfillment, the fulfilling lives or whatnot, and if they're mindful or not, I'm reading the last chapter is about uncertainty. That's a word that really makes me feel anxious just by looking at it because I can't deal with uncertainty. And as someone who struggles a lot with anxiety, I don't know how to handle that. I would say that is the worst thing for me ever. So how being mindful would help with uncertainty? We are actually living in the age of uncertainty with AI,
Yeah.
Global warming, wars, leaders that are very questionable. It is all very uncertain and it's scary.
I mean, the obvious thing is it does what I talk about actually in leadership through emotional intelligence. So one of the biggest things that you'll find through mindfulness is it allows you to create better decision making, and through that helps, just as a baseline, that alone helps the uncertainty, because you will start to understand your own mind. And where a lot of uncertainty comes from is not actually that it's uncertain, it's that your interaction with it is uncertain. Once you realize that becomes part of how you move forward. The obvious thing, this is a discussion me and you had a couple of years ago, where you had a reason not to travel, and my continued word was next. And I just broke down every single one. You were uncertain, and so you created reasons as to why it couldn't happen. When you realized that, because you literally in that conversation said, oh, okay, yeah, no, I am just putting things in my way. And that was a recognition of what you're doing. And in that moment, that was my mindful realization. A lot of the uncertainty isn't external uncertainty at all. It's actually internal uncertainty that we show ourselves as being external. And once you realize that that's what you're doing, once you're mindful of your own mind, that's when you can look through the uncertainty. Yes, there will still be external uncertainties of, wars and everything else. But once you understand your own mind within it, then that's what you have control of.
When you were looking through the studies and going through the papers and the research, did you find anything about the areas of the brain that activate while practicing mindfulness? Can you activate the entire brain, or is it just like the prefrontal cortex, or what's it in particular?
There's a load of them. Prefrontal cortex is one area. So yes, it not only is it activated by mindfulness, and you can do those. If anyone's seen them on TV, they are real. You can have those probes put on. You can see different parts lighting up. But beyond that, they can actually see a physical change in the brain from mindfulness.
Right. My amygdala is bigger than usual, and that's because trauma. But I know you can actually shrink it, and I feel like this would be a good practice to do that. I read the research a few years ago that mindfulness helped shrink your amygdala.
And there's a lot of things like the release of cortisol, which can be create a lot of stress.
Yeah.
That can be curbed as well by the interaction with mindfulness. There is a lot of things that the brain does that can be offset by mindfulness, both in terms of how it functions and in its physical representation. The reconnection of neural links in your brain. So many different things can be affected, more than what you'd think, to the point where literally I would have to go back into the research to check everything, because a lot of this I have, of course, given a summarized version for the book, because otherwise the book would be 3,000 pages, not 300.
But you can literally rewire your brain and strength. You can strengthen some connections and shrink others and disconnect others.
The research I use is actual journaled, peer-reviewed, empirical
actual research.
That's the point. That's why we have that first bit of the book where, hey, we're just chatting. And my style of writing can be a little bit flowery, is the word I think you would say. If anyone knows Nietzsche and Bourdieu, my university lecturer once said I'm a mix between the two in writing. So that, but it's very over elaborate in certain areas because it's just how I write. So if anybody is kind of very put off by how some people write in certain language, that may not be the best help for you. But in the first few chapters, at least, although there is that kind of wordage and vocabulary, it is far more of a chat than the later chapters become. That's where I tend to bring in a lot more of the kind of the science and everything else. But there is a foreword to explain what's happening, and the afterword to kind of wrap it up as well. So that if you really get bored, you can always skip to the end, I guess, and see who it was, the butler that killed the main master.
I actually, the neuroscience part is what gets me. I find that so particularly interesting. See which parts of the brain can be improved, which ones can be activated, which ones you can deactivate based on what you need. So that's really interesting. Now, Adam, there's a question that I want to ask you. It's a very selfish question, but I do want to ask you about the process of writing a book, because I know that many people who listen to this podcast are writers, they're copywriters, they're ghostwriters, and people who want to become authors as well, like you. What was the process like for you? I know you told us a little bit in the beginning, but then, the actual birthing of the book, because it's like, I feel like it's a big project. Like you made it sound like a cakewalk, but it's actually not a cakewalk.
First off, I feel sorry for all of you out there that are doing those things. I've done them, including the ghostwriting. And oh my god, ghostwriters half the time you're writing stuff that you could not give a shit about. You don't actually care. You can make it sound very eloquent and wonderful, and they've given you 2 seconds of a voice note, and you've got to make it into a 4,000 word chapter. But the difference is when you're writing a book, if you don't want to write it, you shouldn't. I think that's the biggest take home, especially for ghostwriters. Because I think for ghostwriters that are thinking, I can do this. I write all the time anyway. I'm writing these people's books. I can do this myself. There wasn't an idea originally given to you. You probably didn't want to write it. If you're thinking, I want to write a book, and then you just think, well, I've written stuff on this before, let's write about this, the book's going to be crap. Because it's not what you want to write about. It's what somebody else pays you to want to write about. And so I think the first thing is for it to be something you care about. If you just start writing and then go, actually, this is crap, let's start again. Don't be afraid of doing that. Free writing effectively. Don't be afraid of doing that, because I think so many people think, no, I can make something out of this. It's the sunk cost fallacy, where I put so much into this that it will work out. It has to work out because I've already given so much time and everything. Give it up. And I think that's where a lot of authors, a lot of writers get stuck. How many people have read books out there where you just think, this was great until chapter 4, and then they clearly didn't care about it anymore. And I think that's the point, is you need to care about what you're writing about, and you need to continue caring all the way through. So just start writing, and then see where your mind is actually taking you. Pick on something, that you're interested in, because I think for a lot of people, and again, especially ghostwriters, you probably aren't used to writing for yourself. Write for yourself. Write an essay on something. I don't know, you like poems. Write about the history of poetry. And then when you finish it, you'll be like, don't know if I actually like poetry anymore. Or, you know what, I really want to know more about this person. I really want to know more about that. And okay, and then suddenly we have book ideas now. You have chapter ideas because you started writing something. And I think that's the big one for a lot of ghostwriters. The one thing I would say as well is when you're coming to write it and you're trying to find a structure, I think you should always do a foreword. I think you should always do an afterword. It's the same as when you're writing an essay at university. It's your introduction. If you don't understand what you're doing, if your introduction doesn't make any sense, you don't expect your essay or your book to make any sense. Your foreword should be the lead in of like, okay, so I really want to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about this, and this. And if you write your foreword and you come to the end of it and think, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, good. You're probably going the right direction there. And then also make sure that you actually write the chapter titles first. That doesn't mean you can't change them. They can be adaptive. Definitely adapted.
Also, you created an outline first.
When you're doing that, that allows you to kind of go, okay, I know what I'm writing about. Because otherwise, you can just start not making any goddamn sense. Or what you'll do, and I've definitely done this, I've done this in other books that I've written, you'll start writing about the next chapter. Because you're like, well, I know what I want to say next, so I've just, oh shit, that's not going to be in this chapter. I've got to this like 1,000 words too early. Right, shit. Whereas if you're expressly stating it as like, right, this is going to be there, this is going to be there, this is going to be there, then go.
I have I don't know how many, but I have many unfinished books that I was like, yeah, I actually don't want to talk about. I actually don't care about this. And I started doing that. When I started doing that, but I want to start writing about this part of the book, like this chapter. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, yeah, no, bye. But now I'm actually feeling pumped for this one. This one's going, actually, I feel like this one's going well. The publishing part, was it very hard? Was it a grueling task?
So I've spoken to a lot of authors over the years, and my first book that will hopefully be out in March or April, and almost all of them just said there is absolutely no reason whatsoever that you should look for a publisher. And these are well-established authors. I won't say their names, but from where I am, these are names that people will recognize. Once you get into that world, you start to lose control immediately. Where if you go through a lot of self-publishing, and when I say self-publishing, use something like Amazon, use KDP, because don't go to your local printers and say, hey, do you do book printing? Because people do that. It's not going anywhere. It's 2021. Yeah, I've seen people do that, especially when it's local history. You get a lot of people that do local history, and it'd be like only for that village type thing. If you go to KDP, for instance, because KDP, which is Amazon, they bought a publishing company. The reason they can do the publishing is not because they one day said, hey, we can do publishing. They bought a publishing company and just put their label on it. That's why. So when you've got things like that, and there's a lot of authors out there, and when I say authors, I mean people that think they're authors but have never published their book and never shown it to anyone. And this is going to sound really harsh right now. The amount of people that have an issue with something being self-published compared to those that don't shows you who's published and who isn't. Because those actually look down on others for being self-published are the ones that have never published anything. And if you do a second edition, then go to the publisher are the most successful authors, because they're not. It's the same as if you're
Makes
running.
sense.
For if you're a marathon runner, the person that has done 500 marathons is the person helping the person at the back. That's the big difference. Because I know that for a lot of people there is this difference. But why? If people enjoy it, you've got in America alone for the past 3 years running, you've had over 2 million self-published books in America. Last year was 2.3 million. It makes up around 31% of worldwide sales in books. Just around a third of all book sales of any kind worldwide are self-published.
I was under the impression that you needed like an ISBN and the VAR and all that.
Okay, so here's the difference. ISBN is needed if you're looking for it to be sold commercially. That doesn't stop people having 10,000 of their own books published and then going and selling them on a market or selling them.
So you can sell a book on Amazon without an ISBN.
No. Market, not marketplace. Market. So there are people that you'll go and see people just selling it without an ISBN. If, for instance, you sell on Amazon, there's two ways you can do it with the ISBN. You can get your own ISBN, gives you a little bit more control, but you've got to buy 10 of them, depending on where you're going. If you're in the UK, it's Nielsen UK.
Why 10? Like, do you need one per country?
No, it's they only sell them in batches of 10 in most of the suppliers. Yeah.
But you actually use one.
Yeah.
But you can then publish other books. Like if you want to write 9 other books, you have your ISBNs.
Yeah, the ISBN.
You can publish the rest of your books later. I actually want to read them.
Alternatively, if you just publish through KDP normally through Amazon, they give you an ISBN number. So you've just got one. They give it to you for free. It's part of the thing. They're just going to go, there you go. As long as you make sure you've got the space. You know, whoever's designing your book, make sure that you've got enough space for an ISBN at the bottom. Because
designing the book, I saw the cover, but I if you want to show it in the camera and why you chose it, did you make it?
So,
did you choose it?
So this one, I got someone to design it for me through my interactions with it. The first thing that came back reinforced how people see mindfulness. So I said pretty much at the start what I wanted, but they're the immediate thing. So you can see this relatively dark. There's a brain. There's technology around it all. You know, that's what we ended up with. But the first response I got was a white, completely white with a flower in the middle.
What? A flower?
Yeah, I was like, because when you say mindfulness to people, that's mindfulness. No, what it needs to be is this. This is what I want on the back. You know, the way that it appears in the back. I was very specific about how this is, and I was very specific about how this is. I told them exactly what I wanted, and they've done a really good job. But it did take that kind of second thing of going, hey, not what I'm talking about. Let's get the brain in there. I want the mind. Actually, I said the mind. So they were very good. For me saying the mind, they kind of extrapolated what I meant by that and got to this, which is very good. And I wanted the mind. I wanted the technology. I wanted it darker because that was the point. But you can find decent designers all over the place. For the love of God, if you do, for instance, want to publish through KDP, do not use their service of creating a cover. It will be shit. They may be good at understanding publishing. They can't do that. Get a decent creator, and you can do this everywhere. I mean, there's so many places out there you can find it. I mean, my first book, Smartest State of Mind, although I have not yet come around to publishing it. I've had the design of the cover for that for years, and actually, it was someone I knew through university because they were doing a degree in design.
You can use Fiverr, Upwork. Just ask someone on
make sure
on your socials. Ask your friends.
Do make sure that you're fully interacting with it though, for many different reasons. So make sure that what you want is what is on the page, and then go from there. That shouldn't be a massive amount of it. The biggest thing that comes when you're more in the publication, in self-publication, comes
because you need to be aware, like if it's royalty free, if it's actually unique, the copyrights.
But then the biggest thing is making sure that the layout of your book is right, the margins are right. So if you're writing like I do, just normally on Word, the margins are not right. So you try and put it out to page, it's going to be over the page. So you need to make sure the margins that you want. You can find templates for it, but that can be changing. So you can then, and there's plenty of things online to help you make sure that the cover is in the right ratios and all that kind of stuff. But do make sure that you can find the exact measurements because of how many pages you have. Don't try and do that. Don't try and do your cover before you finish your book. And also, when you change the margins, you suddenly have a longer book. Because if you're writing again on, the kind of A4 which you don't. If anyone's watching in America, I know you don't have A4. I don't know what the alternative is, but A4 to the rest of the world. If you're writing on that on Word, and then you try and put it into margins for the book, suddenly you're going to have like at least another 50% longer book. So you're going to have to make sure of how that interacts with the cover, because obviously your spine will be affected by that. The bleeding over will be affected by that, and just simple things like that. And then if you're self-publishing, you just need to determine what kind of price you're looking for. What kind of thing do you think is fair? What do you think it's going to sell at? For instance, for this, if you're in the UK, it's $12.99. If you're in the US or certain other places, it's $15.99. It's a 316-page book that's, I think, well researched on mindfulness, and that's pretty good. Personally, I mean,
and it's a tool that you can use for life.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's reasonable. I don't think I've overpriced it. I potentially underpriced it, but I don't. I think I've been fair because it's my first release book.
But it's okay. Yeah. What was the feeling? What thoughts came to your head when you're like, okay, pal, send?
Well, there's two things. One, that's not when it was done because it needed to be proofread. So
yeah, when it was published, that's what I'm trying to say.
No, at that point
it was proofread by them, by Amazon. Yes,
it's all it's in review. So the whole thing, because they also check whether you've stolen someone's work, basically. Mm-hmm. So that's all of that.
And it's okay that they do.
Yeah, exactly. They check it for proofreading to check whether it's not like AI, to check whether it's not somebody else's work. They do that. But when it comes back as like, okay, now it's scheduled, it was, oh, thank fuck for that. Because it was the kind of, oh, finally. Because the writing wasn't the problem. For me, it was getting the margins, getting everything uploaded the right way. That was.
It's such a pain, the margins.
Yeah, because it's not because in my mind, I would want it to be done different ways. But obviously, because they've got to get it published in certain ways, a certain way that the company they bought does it. So what I will say is, other than one interaction, every single interaction I had, specifically with KDP anyway, was absolutely fantastic. Literally, go and contact us, request a call, put your phone number in, they ring you immediately. Absolutely brilliant. To the point where they emailed me with templates so that I could get my cover onto templates, and they walked me through as to exactly how to do it, and then saying, if you need anything else, email me back. Then when I got it all done and I sent an email thanking them, I got an email back saying, I'm so glad this was helpful. If you do have anything else, make sure to email us. But, they were very, very good with that, I would say. So if you're looking at self-publish, KDP is probably the biggest bookseller in the world. I mean, plus the fact it's not just on Amazon, or it's got the potential not just to be on Amazon if you use KDP. It can also be to all of their subsidiaries and distributors, which also includes universities and all those kind of things as well.
Don't get mad. But if you publish with KDP as well, you can publish an ebook, right?
Unfortunately, you can do ebook, yeah. But yeah, no, you can do a hardcover. And then, so for instance, if you're doing an ebook, for instance, you can do a premiering as well, so people can pre-order if you're doing an ebook. They don't do it on all of them, but if you're doing an ebook, they can pre-order as well, so you can get some of that marketing stuff out there.
Okay, Adam, you have a really good voice and you have a good mic. Are you planning on publishing the audiobook?
Honestly, it's too long. I'm not going to. And as well, the problem is that I'm also dyslexic. So even reading back my own words, I will not get through that. Even when I've written my own scripts for anything, if I try and read it back, it's why when I used to give speeches, I didn't have anything written. It's why when I do podcasts, I don't have anything written, because there's a disconnect. So if I try to read this, it just wouldn't work.
What a bummer. But anyways, before you leave, Adam, is there any question I didn't ask you would have liked me to, or anything you want to close with?
Nothing I can think of. I mean, obviously, if there's anybody left at this point, well done. But yeah, I mean, do go and buy the book. This Awaken Awareness, Mindfulness and the Age of Distraction. Adam Parsons has got the little things. Yeah. The links will be in the description below. But no, I don't think there's anything. I think mindfulness is just something that people need to get over, this idea of it being this kind of frou-frou, flowery LA wellness stuff. It's not. I have interacted with people doing mindfulness in all different walks of life. All different political backgrounds, all different countries, all different ethnic backgrounds, everything. It crosses all borders of every kind, because mindfulness is just part of the human condition that we've so disrupted ourselves by interacting with modern life. And that's kind of the point of the book as well, is to see if we can then reconnect ourselves.
I love that. Now, Adam, where can everyone find you?
My podcast. So again, description down below. I'm assuming Betty's put it there. If it's not there, blame her. Ask in the comments.
I will. But you'll tell me the things.
Yeah, the It's Good to Talk podcast obviously is the place to find me. She's going to be on the next episode, but that's the main place. And then obviously go and look at on Amazon as well. If you do go onto Amazon, to whether you're buying the book or not, the author central, if you click on the picture of me, underneath, you can actually kind of follow me on Amazon. So the next time I bring up another book, it will tell you.
Thank you for being here, and for everyone listening, thank you for being here. And yeah, subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. I always forget to say that, and it always sounds so weird when I say it. So Adam, thank you for being here, and see you next time.